I pushed through the glass doors of the spa and felt the cool air wrap around me like silk. The lobby smelled like eucalyptus and something floral I couldn't name, expensive and foreign. Everything was white marble and gold accents, the kind of place that whispered wealth before you even stepped inside. I dressed simply that day. Jeans, a cotton blouse, my hair pulled back in a loose bun. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just wanted to relax, to feel human again after weeks of exhaustion. The receptionist looked up from her desk, her eyes scanning me from head to toe in less than a second. Her expression shifted, barely perceptible, but I caught it, the tightening around her mouth, the way her gaze went cold. But I told myself I was imagining things, that maybe she was just having a bad day. I approached the desk with a polite smile, my appointment confirmation pulled up on my phone. She didn't return the smile. Instead, she glanced at her computer screen, then back at me, as if I were an interruption she hadn't expected. "I have a 2 p.m. appointment," I said, keeping my voice steady and warm. She clicked her mouse a few times, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the keys. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable, and I felt something tighten in my chest. "I'm sorry," she finally said, her tone anything but apologetic, "but we don't have any availability today." I blinked, confusion washing over me like cold water. "But I booked this weeks ago," I said, pulling up my confirmation email to show her. She barely glanced at it. "There must have been a mistake," she said, her voice flat and dismissive. I felt heat rising to my face, not from anger yet, but from the sting of being dismissed so casually. Around me, other clients moved through the lobby. Women in designer athleisure, men in crisp linen shirts. No one looked at me, but I felt invisible in a way that burned. "Can you check again?" I asked, my voice quieter now, almost pleading. But I could already see the answer in her eyes. She had decided I didn't belong here. She sighed, as if I were wasting her time, and turned her screen slightly away from me. "Like I said, we're fully booked," she repeated, her tone firmer now, almost condescending. I stood there, frozen, trying to process what was happening. This wasn't about the appointment. I could feel it in the air, in the way she refused to meet my eyes. It was about the way I looked, the simplicity of my clothes, the assumption she'd made the moment I walked in. I wanted to argue, to demand she check properly, but shame was already creeping up my spine. Maybe I didn't belong here, I thought for just a moment, and hated myself for thinking it. But then I heard footsteps behind me, confident and quick, echoing across the marble floor. "Excuse me," a man's voice called out, smooth and authoritative. The receptionist's face changed instantly. Her eyes widened, her posture straightened like a soldier at attention. I turned to see a man in his 50s, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, walking toward the desk. He had the kind of presence that commanded a room without effort, every movement deliberate and sure. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his eyes moving between the receptionist and me. She opened her mouth, but no words came out at first, just a stammering breath. I felt my heart hammering in my chest, unsure whether this was about to get worse or somehow, impossibly better. But I had no idea what was about to happen next. The man stepped closer to the desk, his gaze now fixed on the computer screen. "What name is the appointment under?" he asked, his voice calm but carrying an edge I couldn't quite place. I told him my last name, and the moment it left my lips, I saw something shift in his expression. His eyes widened just slightly, recognition flashing across his face like lightning. The receptionist looked confused now, her confidence from moments ago evaporating into thin air. He leaned over the desk, reading the screen himself, and when he looked back at me, there was something different in his eyes. Respect. Maybe even concern. "Please wait here," he said to me gently, then turned to the receptionist with a look that could freeze fire. The receptionist's face had gone pale, all the color draining from her cheeks like water from a broken glass. She started to speak, to explain, but he raised a hand and she fell silent immediately. I stood there, my mind racing, trying to understand what had just shifted in the air around us. My last name wasn't common, but it wasn't famous either, or so I thought. I'd never used it to open doors, never flaunted it like a key to unlock special treatment. But something about it had changed everything in an instant, and I didn't know whether to feel validated or disturbed. The man looked at me again, and this time I saw something else in his expression, almost like an apology. Whatever was coming next, I realized, nothing would be the same after this moment. "I'm Marcus de Leon," the man said, extending his hand to me with a warmth that felt genuine. "I own this spa, and I sincerely apologize for this misunderstanding." His handshake was firm but not aggressive, the kind that acknowledged me as an equal. The receptionist stood frozen behind her desk, her eyes darting between us like she was watching her career crumble in real time. I wanted to feel triumphant, vindicated, but instead I just felt hollow. Because this wasn't about me as a person. It was about a name, about something I represented that I hadn't even invoked. "Your family," he continued, lowering his voice slightly, "has been incredibly generous to this community." And that's when I understood. He knew exactly who I was, or rather, who my family was. My grandfather had built a fortune in real estate across Miami. His name attached to foundations, hospitals, cultural centers. I'd grown up in his shadow, benefiting from his success but trying to live my own life, quietly, without the weight of expectation. I rarely used the family name for anything, preferring to be anonymous, to be judged on my own terms. But here, in this moment, it had been used without my permission, simply by existing in a database. Marcus was already gesturing toward the hallway, his hand hovering near my shoulder but not touching, guiding me forward. "Please let me personally ensure you receive our very best service today," he said. The receptionist's mouth opened as if to apologize, but I didn't look back at her. I felt like I was walking through a dream where the rules had suddenly changed, and I didn't know how to feel about it. As we walked down the corridor, I caught glimpses of treatment rooms through half-open doors. Soft lighting, the sound of water trickling, hushed voices. Everything felt surreal, like I'd stepped into a different dimension where I was suddenly worthy of respect. But it wasn't me they were respecting, I realized. It was the name, the money, the legacy I'd inherited but never asked for. Marcus kept talking, explaining the treatments available, offering me upgrades and amenities I hadn't requested. His voice was professional, courteous, but there was something else underneath. Nervousness, perhaps, or the fear of offending someone connected to power. I felt anger building inside me, not at him exactly, but at the whole situation, at how easily respect could be given or withheld. "I just wanted a simple massage," I said quietly, interrupting his litany of options. He stopped walking and looked at me, really looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time as a person rather than a name. "Of course," he said, his tone softening. "I understand." But did he? Could he possibly understand what it felt like to be invisible one moment and suddenly seen the next, not for who you are but for what you represent? We reached a private suite, far more luxurious than what I'd originally booked, and he held the door open for me. "Sophia will be your therapist today," he said. "She's our best. Anything you need, anything at all, just ask." I nodded, managing a small smile, but inside I felt fractured, split between gratitude and resentment. He hesitated at the door, as if weighing whether to say something more. "I will be addressing what happened at the front desk," he said finally, his voice firm. "That kind of treatment is unacceptable, regardless of who someone is." But the damage was done, and we both knew it. The question was whether it would change anything beyond this single moment. The treatment room was perfect. Warm stones, soft music, the scent of lavender filling the air. Sophia entered with a gentle knock, her smile genuine and her hands already knowing and capable. As I lay on the table, feeling her work the tension from my shoulders, I closed my eyes and tried to let it all go. But my mind kept returning to that receptionist's face, to the way she'd looked at me with such casual dismissal. How many other people had she turned away? How many had believed her when she said there were no appointments? I thought about all the times I'd been treated well because of my last name, and all the times I'd been treated well simply because I looked the part. What about when I didn't look the part? What about everyone else who never got a second chance, whose names meant nothing? The questions swirled in my mind like water circling a drain, pulling me down into uncomfortable truths I'd been avoiding. Sophia's hands moved across my back in practiced rhythms, but I couldn't fully surrender to the relaxation. I kept thinking about the receptionist, about what Marcus would do to her, about whether she'd lose her job. Part of me wanted her to face consequences for her judgment, for the way she'd made me feel small. But another part of me wondered if she was just a symptom of something larger, a system that taught people to value appearances over humanity. "Are you okay?" Sophia asked gently, sensing the tension still locked in my muscles. "Just thinking," I whispered, and she gave me space, her hands continuing their work in patient silence. I realized that this moment, this experience, was trying to teach me something I didn't want to learn. Something about power, about privilege, about how the world really worked when you stripped away the comfortable illusions. When the treatment ended, I felt physically relaxed but emotionally exhausted. Marcus was waiting outside the treatment room, his expression hopeful, eager to know if everything had been satisfactory. "It was wonderful, thank you," I said, and I meant it, even though wonderful felt like the wrong word for everything I was feeling. He walked me back to the lobby, and I could see the receptionist was no longer at the desk. Someone else had taken her place. I wondered where she was, what was happening to her, and felt a complicated knot of emotions I couldn't untangle. "Again, my sincerest apologies," Marcus said at the door. "I hope you'll give us another chance to serve you properly." I looked at him, at his earnest expression, at the way he genuinely seemed to care now that he knew who I was. And I realized that the real question wasn't whether I'd return. It was what I would do with this knowledge now that I had it. As I stepped back out into the Miami sunshine, the heat hit me like a wall after the cool interior. I walked to my car slowly, my mind replaying the entire encounter like a film on loop. The dismissal, the recognition, the transformation, it had all happened so quickly based on nothing I'd actually done. I sat in the driver's seat for a long moment before starting the engine, my hands resting on the steering wheel. What had changed? Everything and nothing. I'd gotten my massage, received an apology, probably cost someone their job or at least a serious reprimand. But something had shifted inside me too, something I couldn't quite name yet. A question was forming, and I knew I'd have to answer it eventually. What do you do when you realize the world treats you better than it should? I didn't go back to that spa for 3 weeks, even though Marcus called twice to follow up, his voice warm and solicitous on my voicemail. Each time I thought about returning, I felt that same uncomfortable knot in my stomach, that same question circling my mind. I started paying attention to things I'd never noticed before. How I was treated in stores, restaurants, anywhere I used my credit card with my full name. The pattern was undeniable. Certain doors opened more easily for me than for others, and it had nothing to do with who I was as a person. I watched a woman in worn sneakers get followed by security in a boutique while I browsed freely in my casual clothes. I saw a young man in a fast food uniform wait 20 minutes for a table while I was seated immediately at the same restaurant. The world was showing me its inequities in high definition, and I couldn't look away anymore. What do you do when you're on the privileged side of injustice, I wondered, and realized that's the question most people in my position never bother to ask. I finally returned to the spa on a Tuesday afternoon, unannounced this time, no appointment. A different receptionist greeted me, younger, with nervous eyes and an eager-to-please smile that made my heart ache. "Do you have any availability for a massage today?" asked, keeping my voice casual. She checked her computer with genuine focus, no judgment in her gaze, just professional courtesy. "We have an opening in 45 minutes if you don't mind waiting," she offered. I said yes and settled into the waiting area, watching the flow of clients coming and going. I noticed how this receptionist treated everyone with the same careful respect, regardless of how they were dressed or what they looked like. It made me wonder if she'd been trained differently, or if the previous receptionist was simply gone, her judgment deemed too costly to keep. Marcus appeared from his office, surprised to see me, his face lighting up with recognition and what seemed like genuine relief. "I'm so glad you came back," he said, sitting down across from me in the waiting area. For a moment we sat in silence, and I decided to ask the question that had been haunting me. What happened to her? The woman from before. He shifted uncomfortably, choosing his words carefully. She's no longer with us, he said. Not just because of what happened with you, but because we discovered it wasn't an isolated incident. I felt something complex move through me. Not satisfaction exactly, but a sense that maybe consequences meant something after all. She'd been turning away walk-ins she deemed unsuitable for months, he continued. We only discovered it when we started investigating after your experience. I absorbed this information slowly, thinking about all those people who'd been turned away, who'd probably never known a different outcome was possible. I've implemented new training, Marcus said, his voice earnest. For everyone. About unconscious bias, about our values, about treating every single person who walks through that door with dignity. It sounded good, rehearsed maybe, but I wanted to believe it was genuine. Why did my name matter so much? I asked him directly, tired of dancing around the truth. He looked uncomfortable but didn't dodge the question. Because I recognized it, and I knew your family's reputation, and I was afraid of what it would mean if word got out that we'd treated you poorly. His honesty surprised me, the rawness of it. But here's what I learned, he continued. Every person who walks through that door deserves to be treated like they matter, not because of their last name, but because they're human. I wanted to believe him, wanted to think that one incident could catalyze real change, but I was too realistic to be that optimistic. Still, it was something, an acknowledgement, a step, a willingness to examine the systems that allowed judgment to masquerade as professionalism. The truth is, I said slowly, I've been treated well my whole life because of a name I was born into, not anything I earned. He nodded, listening. And I never questioned it until I saw how quickly it could be taken away, how easily I could be dismissed if the wrong person looked at me. We sat with that truth between us, uncomfortable and necessary. So what do we do about it? I asked, and the we felt important, an acknowledgement that this was a shared responsibility. We keep trying, he said. We keep examining our assumptions, training our people, holding ourselves accountable. My massage that day was good, professional, the same quality I'd received before, but without the weight of special treatment. The therapist didn't know my last name, didn't treat me any differently than she would anyone else, and it felt surprisingly liberating. Afterward, as I prepared to leave, Marcus met me at the door one more time. I want you to know, he said, that you taught me something important. Thank you for that. I nodded, appreciating the sentiment even if I wasn't sure how deep the lesson had really gone. As I walked to my car, I thought about all the people who never get thanked for enduring discrimination, who face dismissal and judgment without recognition or apology. I'd been lucky. My name had saved me, had turned humiliation into vindication in a matter of minutes. But what about everyone else? In the weeks that followed, I started doing something small but deliberate. I stopped using my full name in situations where it might open doors unfairly. I introduced myself as just my first name, paid with cash when I could, tried to experience the world as someone without the shield of privilege. It was humbling and sometimes frustrating, but it gave me a glimpse into what most people navigate every single day. I also started volunteering with a nonprofit that helped people prepare for job interviews, teaching them how to navigate bias and present themselves with confidence. Felt like a small thing, inadequate even, against the enormity of systemic inequality. But it was something, a way to use what I'd learned, to turn a painful experience into something that might help someone else. I couldn't change my last name or the privilege it carried, but I could choose what I did with it. And maybe that was the lesson I was meant to learn all along. I did return to that spa occasionally, watching to see if the changes Marcus promised were real or just performative. I noticed small things. More diverse staff, training certificates on the wall, a subtle shift in the atmosphere that felt more welcoming. It wasn't perfect, no place ever is, but it was different, and different felt like progress. One day, I saw the new receptionist greet an elderly woman in a faded coat with the same warmth she'd shown a man in an expensive suit just minutes before. It was a small moment, barely noticeable, but it made something in my chest tighten with hope. Because respect shouldn't be rationed based on appearances or names or bank accounts. It should be the baseline, the starting point, the bare minimum we offer each other. That day in the spa had cracked something open inside me, a comfortable illusion I'd been living in without even knowing it. And while I couldn't undo all the times I'd benefited from unearned privilege, I could choose to see it, acknowledge it, and try to do better. The real question isn't whether we have privilege. Most of us have some form of it in some context, whether we recognize it or not. The question is what we do once we see it, once we understand how the world tilts in our favor while creating obstacles for others. I don't have all the answers, and I make mistakes constantly, still benefit from things I didn't earn and probably never will fully understand. But I'm trying to stay awake to it now, to notice the moments when doors open for me that stay closed for others. And when those moments happen, I'm trying to wedge those doors open a little wider, to use whatever small influence I have to make space for someone else. It's not heroic or extraordinary. It's just human, just the basic responsibility we owe each other. So I'll ask you, have you ever been dismissed because of how you looked, or treated better than you deserved because of something you were born into? What did it teach you about who we are when no one important is watching?